Get ops on now. What the hell is going on with latency? That was the first thing staring back at me when I flipped from Grafana to Slack, still holding my chipped blue mug of jasmine tea. It was 11:42 p.m. on a Thursday, and we didn't have a single deployment planned. Load balancing was gliding along at 86% efficiency. No alerts. No approved diffs. Nothing that should have caused trouble. I tapped my fingers against the desk while Slack lit up with pings and rising panic. One of our core clients, Weston Dynamics, was getting dropped packets and random timeout errors. Their CTO was already in the thread. Their QA lead too. Our VP of sales kept typing, deleting, then typing again. And then Danny jumped in. Danny Rivera, our brand new COO with the personality of a motivational poster and the grace of a flying chair, charged into the war room chat like she was directing the last scene of a Marvel movie. Where's Emily? Why hasn't rollback been initiated? I was already ahead of her, tracing the packet flow through our usual edge node suspects. Something was rerouting traffic in a weird way, and whatever it was didn't line up with anything from that morning's build. Emily, respond. She didn't pause. Didn't breathe. Just tag me again like silence meant I was ignoring a burning building. I'm here, I typed, keeping it calm. Investigating anomaly. No confirmed prot changes on my end. Reviewing logs. Which I was because unlike Danny, I don't scream at shadows before figuring out where the light is coming from. And while we're here, if you're one of the 97% of folks who listens to these stories but hasn't hit subscribe yet, now's the time. It helps way more than you think, and it means we get to keep digging into these chaos under pressure moments. So hit subscribe, drop a like, and let's keep going. Back to the disaster. There's a rhythm to ops work. Real ops work. You don't touch anything until the logs tell you the truth. And mine were starting to whisper. There was a timestamp mismatch. Someone pushed a change, but it never passed through staging. No Jenkins tag. No shadow diff. Just a small tweak in a back-end config file that looked suspiciously new. I leaned closer. Commit C9E8417. Created 9 minutes before Weston's first alert. It wasn't mine. And it definitely wasn't authorized by me. But Danny didn't care about commits or audit trails. She had already jumped into the Zoom crisis call. And before I could finish typing out where the anomaly might have come from, she shouted over everyone like a toddler banging pots in a kitchen. Emily broke everything. Our pipeline is a mess because of her delays. Her voice blasted through my headset, sharp enough to make me flinch. Then before I could respond, she muted me. Muted me. On a live crisis call with Weston's CTO, our legal team, and half our revenue chain listening. I stared at my own reflection faintly glowing in the terminal window. The cursor blinked like it couldn't believe what just happened. My tea had gone cold. Honestly, so had my spine. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to argue. Danny wanted a loud, chaotic fight. Fine. I'd answer with silence and timestamps. I opened the Git repo. Sorted by commit time. Pulled the author data. A junior dev from the marketing side. Someone not even on the ops rotation. Tagged with elevated permissions. Proved by Danny Rivera. I grabbed a screenshot. No comments. No drama. No hashtags. Just the plain truth. Dropped it into Slack. And waited. The graphs didn't climb, they shot straight up. Violent spikes like someone floored the gas and yanked off the steering wheel on the freeway. Latency blasted up 240% in under a minute. Weston's public API endpoints started throwing 503 errors like they were on clearance. And that's when the second alert came in. Not from our own systems, they were still lagging behind. It was Weston's CTO, pinging our dev hotline with one blunt question. Who pushed to prod in the last 10 minutes? My stomach sank because it sure wasn't me. And nobody in ops had late-night push permissions anyway. That's why we had staging windows. So I went straight back to the packet logs, scanning for anything off. There was a strange shift in traffic origin, too sharp to be environmental, too neat to be some random node acting up. I checked yesterday's deployment diff. The build hash didn't match what was currently live. Someone had swapped out a config. Not a full deployment, just a tiny piece of back-end logic tied to Weston's customer lookup endpoints. The exact sort of tweak someone might make if they thought they were being slick, or if they had absolutely no idea what they were messing with. I was seconds away from typing out the alert when Zoom opened. Danny's face filled my screen before the audio even fully connected. Perfect lighting, expensive webcam, and that familiar mix of panic wearing a confident mask. "Emily," she snapped. "What the hell is happening? Why aren't you containing this?" I kept my voice even, currently tracing a mismatch between yesterday's deployment and the current prod hash. "Oh my God, stop with the jargon. Just fix it." She cut me off again. Then she turned her voice toward everyone else on the call and declared, "This is exactly what I warned the board about. Old process. No urgency. We need faster hands on this." Faster hands. From the same woman who saved time by bypassing staging and handing production access to unauthorized test accounts. I muted myself before anything sharp slipped out. Meanwhile, Weston's audit team had already mobilized inside Slack. They were quick, organized, and not about to let nearly $400,000 in downtime get filed under oops. They asked for logs, API headers, approval trails, and the full staging to prod commit chain. I sent everything. Quietly. Cleanly. No editorializing. I also attached the flag report I'd filed 2 days earlier, where I warned about a suspicious access change request that skipped security checks and wasn't approved by anyone in ops. It had been ignored. Buried under Danny's expedited adjustments. 5 minutes later, Weston's CTO replied, "Can you confirm no one from your team approved this?" I answered with one line. No one from operations authorized this push. And I knew exactly what I was looking at now, a perfect paper trail. One Danny never thought anyone would bother tracing. The best part? The junior dev who triggered it wasn't even fully on board yet. Marketing side hire. 6 weeks in. Someone Danny fast-tracked because they had product intuition. Then the data filled in the last missing pieces. Push timestamp, 11:33 p.m. Failure trigger, 11:42 p.m. Rollback window missed, 11:45 p.m. Because Danny locked me out of the decision tree. I started building a snapshot log, labeled every entry, captured every decision tree override and every permission escalation. I wasn't just trying to put out the fire. I was documenting every spark leading to the explosion. And I wasn't alone anymore. Across the Slack grid, Weston's lead backend engineer dropped a message I'll never forget. Just a note. Our team pulled the commit hash. Doesn't match ops. Doesn't even match staging. Someone went straight to prod with test-level logic. Looking forward to hearing who authorized that. The silence after that message landed was heavier than anything Danny had yelled. My mouth was open when the mute hit. Mid-sentence. Mid-breath. Mid-explanation. One moment I was calmly walking everyone through the unauthorized commit and the staging bypass, and the next that red microphone icon lit up. I was muted, silenced in front of 15 people, many of whom outranked me, and all of whom had the power to damage or save our biggest client relationships. Danny didn't even react. She took my forced pause, my inability to speak, as the perfect opening for her performance. "Well, now you see the problem," she said in that polished, passive-aggressive executive tone that makes you want to snap your headset in half. Legacy operations processes, outdated rollback procedures, and a lack of agility. This isn't the first time our systems have been slow to adapt. But I promise everyone here, I'll handle this personally. Handle this personally. Like she was some hero stepping in to fix the mess left by the lowly analyst who dared insist on proper protocol. In the corner of my screen, Weston's CTO Rodrigo Alston tilted his head. Just slightly. Enough to show he was paying attention. He wasn't typing. He wasn't smiling. He was evaluating. Recording everything. I still couldn't speak. Danny had disabled Zoom chat for me too. But Slack was open. So while she kept rambling about modernization, I quietly posted a thread in the ops channel, time-stamped and clean. One screenshot of the Git commit. One log export. One screenshot of the flag I filed 48 hours earlier titled, Unverified Access Elevation Request, Dev/Test Profile. No commentary. I wasn't trying to argue or win points. Logs don't need emotion. They just need daylight. Danny kept talking. She moved on to scalability, real-time responsiveness, and eliminating bottlenecks. Apparently, that was her new euphemism for skipping staging review and rubber stamping a junior marketing dev's request to tweak the UX response header logic on Weston's customer queue. That tiny tweak triggered a recursive call to a deprecated endpoint, one our load balancer never learned to ignore. And she made sure to say my name, on the record, loud. This entire incident stems from a failure to embrace faster iteration. Our ops lead, Emily Tran, has been resistant to real-time change models, which is exactly why I've been pushing for a more adaptive team. We can't let cautiousness cost us clients. I felt heat climb the back of my neck. It wasn't the insult. It was the fact she weaponized my silence. She knew I couldn't respond, and everyone else stayed quiet. Legal product engineering. Even the junior dev she'd mentored sat frozen, staring into his webcam like he wished he could disappear. But I wasn't shrinking anymore. I opened my documentation suite and pulled up every override tied to Danny's Slack account from the last 6 weeks. Highlighted the 4 labeled urgent, bypass required. Exported a new diff trail comparing our current prod hash to staging. 6 mismatches, all outside ops approval. Then I drafted the file I knew Weston's CTO would soon request. A root cause initiation matrix with source links, event correlations, and the commit chain. I didn't have a title yet, but I already knew the closing line. Final trigger commit approved by non-ops executive override. Unauthorized use of elevated credentials initiated cascade. When the call finally ended, Danny's parting words were, "I'll be following up with board-side stakeholders directly." Of course she would. I closed Zoom, opened Notion, clicked into my "If shit hits the fan" folder, and I documented everything. The commit sat on my screen like a bloodstain on a wedding dress. Timestamp, 11:33 p.m. Label, small tweak to optimize customer queue flow. Author, Tyler_dev. Branch, hotfix/Liviux adjustment. Pushed, directly to production. No code review, no staging, no CI checks, no automated rollback buffer. Just pure unfiltered arrogance wrapped inside a one-line change that yanked a deprecated logic call from a UX experiment we'd buried months ago under the label, permanently retired. I didn't even need a full diff to know what it hit, Weston's dynamic queue handler, the backbone of their entire customer API when traffic spikes. And the logic Tyler patched in? It was recursive in the worst possible way, an infinite loop that bounced requests between dead endpoints until the whole system choked. 9 minutes later, Weston went up in flames. I flagged Tyler's name. He wasn't part of ops. He wasn't on the deployment access list. He'd been added through one of Danny's overrides just 2 weeks earlier with the note, "Exception granted UX Agility Initiative." I flagged that at the time. Loudly. Filed a risk report. Emailed the override note. Nothing. Just a Slack thumbs up from Danny and a closed ticket. I pulled up the Git interface and filtered by author. There it was, Tyler_dev. Someone last seen fiddling around in marketing's dev sandbox. Never went through rotation. Never cleared for production. And yet he was here, effectively wiring explosives into our live infrastructure like a toddler handed a flamethrower. I hovered over the screen for a long moment. My face stayed neutral, but inside, it was surgical rage. Not yelling. Not dramatic. Just that cold, precise anger that hits when someone burns down your house and hands you the lighter like they're doing you a favor. I clipped the window. Nothing fancy. Nothing doctored. Just the essentials. Commit hash. Timestamp. Author. Direct to prod push path. Danny's override tag. No commentary. No color. Facts only. Then I opened Slack and dropped the screenshot into #OpsWarRoom with a single line. Commit timeline pre-crash deployment trace. That was it. No tags. No emojis. No explanation. Because this wasn't about defending myself anymore. This was about the truth. And the truth doesn't need me to narrate. It just needs receipts. Seconds later, Weston's senior backend engineer reacted with the eyeball emoji. Then a flame. Then silence. 10 seconds after that, Rodrigo, the CTO, posted, "Confirming this pushed live before the cascade?" I didn't bother typing an answer. I just uploaded the Jenkins log. There was no build. No job. No staging. Just Tyler. Raw pushing code into the heart of our system like some maniac who'd been handed admin rights as a party favor. The reactions didn't matter. The Slack thread didn't matter. What mattered was simple. The truth wasn't stuck in my mouth anymore. It was out in the open. It had weight. And timestamps. And it was already carving itself into everyone's memory. Dani could scream herself hoarse. The logs were louder. And I wasn't done documenting. Not even close. Rodrigo didn't follow up with a polite nudge. His first message after the commit screenshot was sharp, clean, and surgical. Full access logs from last 24 hours. And rollback history from prod. Now. No softening. No diplomacy. Just the tone of a man who already knows someone's lying and is ready to cut the problem out by the root. I didn't hesitate. I opened our observability stack, pulled the elevated access trace, packaged it into a version-locked archive with checksum signatures, and dropped the download link to him. 3 minutes later, I sent the second payload. My original flag report. Subject: unauthorized role elevation, Tyler Mundersford. Filed 48 hours before the outage. Included: staging exclusion trace, sandbox permissions list, final audit notes. Attached: Dani's Slack approval bypassing ops review. Every field was filled. Every line was timestamped. Every ignored warning laid bare. No commentary required. I just wrote. Attached full trace. Root cause notes highlighted. Rodrigo replied with nothing but a thumbs up emoji, followed by running crosscheck now. Then silence. But it wasn't the cold, punishing kind. It was that charged stillness right before something explodes. The moment when the fuse burns low and everyone waits for the blast. Inside our internal Slack, things were shifting. Dani still wasn't answering. Not to legal. Not to product. Not to Weston. Because Rodrigo wasn't talking to her anymore. He was talking to the data. 15 minutes later, Weston's backend lead dropped a message in #ops escalation. Your logs are clean. Confirmed. Everything matches timestamped protocol. Then another. The commit path is clearly an anomaly. Cross-referencing now. I leaned back and finally let my shoulders loosen. Not from relief because this was far from finished, but from the quiet realization that the tide had turned. I wasn't trying to defend myself anymore. I was walking them through a forensic map of the fire Dani lit. Then blamed on me. They pulled session IDs. They traced API call chains. They matched our logs with Slack threads. Everything I'd recorded lined up perfectly. No gaps. No delays. And every warning I'd filed? Time-stamped. Ignored. Weston's lead SRE added one last note. Appreciate the clarity and structure. We're replicating your trace internally. They weren't just reviewing my work. They were using it to stabilize their entire system. My documentation had become the cleanup strategy for the inferno Dani unleashed. Meanwhile, Dani's little green executive icon stayed gray. No response. No apology. No sudden leadership moment. I didn't need one. Because somewhere in a very quiet war room, Rodrigo was staring at the same Git logs I had. Watching Dani's name sit beside an override approval she'd never admit to. The shift had already started. Not because I yelled. Not because I argued. Because I wrote everything down. Every single time. The email subject line landed with the soft, controlled weight of a verdict. Preliminary audit results. Weston Systems incident. Rodrigo CC Legal, 2 senior infrastructure leads, our head of product Dani and me. No commentary. Just a zipped archive and a single line. Findings attached. Line 32. Line 32. I opened the report. Inside. Buried in that calm bureaucratic tone audits use when they're quietly sharpening a blade. Commit C9E8417 was initiated by Tyler _dev. A test environment account not cleared for production access. Elevated credentials granted via override by COO D. Rivera, without secondary authorization from operations. There it was. 9 lines later. Ops engineer E-trans credentials were not involved. No staging sign-off recorded. Staging bypass flag present in commit header. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. I just stared at the screen. My mug, refilled twice, sat cold again beside me. Bittersweet doesn't even come close. Sure, the truth was out. Documented. Third party verified. But before any of that, they watched Danny hang it on me, mute button and all. And no one said a word. Now those same silent spectators were reacting in Slack with little emoji reactions, like they'd always believed me. Like the audit simply confirmed their suspicions. Please. Rodrigo didn't sugarcoat things either. On the call that followed, his voice was calm, clipped, and lethal. We ran credential comparisons across all activity logs. Tyler's account was only authorized for test and sandbox environments. Someone granted him root-level prod access. That escalation didn't come through ops. A pause. You could feel the tension crackle through the mic. Emily, he said, can you confirm whether this elevation ever appeared in your chain of sign-off? I unmuted for the first time in over 24 hours. My voice was steady low. No, sir. I answered quietly. I flagged the request and noted it required formal security review. It was marked resolved and closed without my signature. Rodrigo let out a low hum, not irritated, just certain. We thought so. Thank you. Then he pivoted with surgical precision. Danny, do you recall initiating this override? Danny didn't answer. And her silence said everything. Her webcam stayed dark. Her polished black and white headshot suddenly looked less like a leadership portrait and more like a memorial card for someone's career. I kept my face still. My heartbeat didn't spike. It was steady, cool. I wasn't angry anymore. Not embarrassed. Just tired. Because to everyone else this was a shocking twist. To me? I'd been holding the receipt from the beginning. Nobody wanted to look at it until the client budget caught fire. They cared now, not because I was blamed, but because Weston's money was on the line. By the time the call wrapped, everything felt different. Rodrigo asked me, not Danny, not product, to provide a detailed incident response framework for future prevention. And when legal asked who currently had production override permissions, I was the one who pulled up the sheet. Danny's name was still there. I highlighted it. Hovered. I didn't delete her access. Not yet. But I was the one holding the key now. And everyone on that call knew it. No yelling. No finger pointing. No muting. The second war room call was quiet. Just breathing, tense clicking, and people trying not to blink too loudly. Everyone joined. Same faces, completely different energy. Legal looked exhausted. Product leads looked stunned. Even the VP of sales, who usually couldn't resist talking, kept his camera off. I sat in my usual corner of the grid. Same chair. Same headset. Same calm posture. But this time nobody dared interrupt me. Rodrigo joined 5 minutes late, long enough to rattle the entire room. He didn't greet anyone. Instead he shared his screen. A black terminal window appeared. He typed a command, pulled the Git log, scrolled, stopped. There it was. Hash. C9E8417. Time. 11:33 p.m. Author. Tyler_dev. Push master branch. Access direct prod. Rodrigo unshared briefly. When his camera came back on, he looked straight ahead, voice smooth and steady, like a surgeon explaining where the incision would go. Who touched prod 9 minutes before a $400,000 outage? Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Nobody answered. I didn't need to. I already had, through logs, timestamps, warnings, and reports. Tyler's name hung in the air like a contagion, and everyone understood the implications. He wasn't ops. He wasn't trained. He wasn't cleared. And someone had handed him root access like a party trick. Danny didn't unmute. Her camera stayed off. Rodrigo asked again, slower this time. Who granted an override without staging, QA, or operations sign-off? Silence. The head of infrastructure inhaled sharply like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Legal scribbled into a notebook like they were drafting an escape plan. Then products lead engineer Ben, who had stayed painfully neutral through all of this, leaned toward his camera. His face looked drained. Danny, he said softly, almost apologetically. The override came through your Slack request. Right. Still nothing. Rodrigo didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Is Danny Rivera on the call? It was clean. Surgical. He wasn't accusing, he was confirming. Her Zoom tile flickered once. Then it vanished. Disconnected. A little red. Left the meeting popped beside her name. No goodbye. No denial. No defense. Just gone. Rodrigo didn't even look surprised. He didn't comment. He didn't sigh. He just moved on. He turned back to the group like nothing had happened. We'll be requesting formal audit control changes, starting with a separation of environments between marketing and operations. Then calmly, we also recommend removing all non-essential override permissions, effective immediately. He didn't say my name. He didn't need to. Every word was directed at me, not as blame but as acknowledgement, a handover. And for the first time since this entire disaster began, I leaned forward. Not to argue. Not to defend myself. Not to prove anything. I leaned forward to take back control. The shame wasn't mine. It never had been. Legal's request hit my inbox at 6:12 a.m. Sharp. Formal. Brutally concise. Subject: root cause analysis and process control audit due EOD. No apology. No soft landing. Just the directive. I opened it in the same chair where I'd sat through 100 deployment shifts. Same tea. Same cracked blue mug. But this time I wasn't documenting warnings. I was writing the record. I built the RCA from scratch. No templates. No shortcuts. Just a clean, precise chain. Incident breakdown, timeline correlation, system impact summaries. I wove in Slack timestamps, Git diffs, Jenkins gaps, and access logs. Every override. Every ignored flag. Every single point where the system trusted someone who never should have been anywhere near the controls. At the top, I typed the title: Root Cause and Preventive Chain Rework, Prod Incident November 17th. Then beneath it, in plain English, incident was initiated by unauthorized commit to production environment by unapproved personnel, escalated via non-operational override. The resulting cascade led to a 74-minute outage affecting Weston Systems Tier 1 API layer. Estimated cost: $417,200. No bolding. No highlighting. The facts carried their own weight. By noon, I had 3 new meetings. Legal Access Controls Review. Board Oversight Liaison Emily Tran. CTO's Office High Priority. Weston Systems. All of them wanted the same thing. The new process chain. Rollback. Sign-off. Access controls. Audit checkpoints. Monitoring. The works. No more executive bypasses. No more quick fixes straight into prod. No more junior marketing devs with system-killing permissions. The irony? I hadn't volunteered for anything. They came to me. Me, the person Danny muted. Me, the one she publicly blamed. Me, the one she said was too slow and too cautious. Now I was writing the rules she ignored. Tyler, the marketing dev, was gone by the end of the day. HR called it a contract realignment, but everyone knew it was a quiet removal. His Slack access vanished before the RCA even finished propagating across the servers. And Danny? Her name no longer appeared on the master override sheet. I didn't remove it. Someone else did. But I saw the audit entry. Permission group, prod override modified by admin, on behalf of board directive. She wasn't fired. Not officially. But she was done in ops. Stripped of access. Stripped of authority. Stripped of the war room she used to bulldoze like it was her personal stage. Her calendar disappeared from shared view. Her initiatives were marked. Paused pending structural realignment. I didn't feel triumphant. There was no celebration. What she broke wasn't just a pipeline. It was trust. It was the backbone of our system. So I started rebuilding it. One permission group at a time. One approval chain at a time. One staging checkpoint at a time. Not because I wanted to get even, but because someone had to fix what she shattered. And for once, the room was finally quiet enough to hear me. The remediation document went live on a gray Tuesday morning, tucked neatly between a product stand-up and a finance sync nobody cared about. No announcement. No internal applause. Just the truth written down exactly where it needed to be. No banner across Slack. Just a quiet confluence link titled, Postmortem, Prod Incident Number 1107 Final Version, Board Signed. I opened it the way you open an old headstone, slow, steady, knowing exactly what's carved into it but needing to see it anyway. My name sat on the byline. Clean. Intact. Untouched. At the top of the document, before the diagnostics, before the diff trails, before the outage math, sat the line I'd written without a hint of hesitation. Trigger event, commit hashtag C908417 by redacted. Approved by interim ops authority bypass staging. No dramatic flair. No bolded names. Just fact, cold, chronological, and backed by timestamps no one could argue with. In the remediation actions list, I'd assign myself one final task. Update access protocol. Remove legacy override group. It took 12 seconds. I opened the permissions console. Entered Danny's name. Selected prod override. Clicked remove. The screen refreshed. Her access vanished like it had never existed. I leaned back and watched the cursor blink on an empty field. No triumphant music. No digital confetti. Just silence, the satisfying kind that comes after you finally set something back where it belongs. Weston kept their contract. No penalties. No reductions. But they added a new clause to their vendor protocol. Quiet, concise, permanent. I helped write it. All production-level changes must be reviewed and authorized exclusively by personnel within the operations division. No marketing, product, or executive exceptions permitted. Signed by their CTO, their legal team, our legal team. Done. Locked. Immutable. That was the real victory. Not the audit. Not the Slack reactions. Not Danny losing access. The win was this. The system worked again. Later that night, I closed my laptop and poured a fresh cup of tea into that same chipped blue mug. The crack in the handle felt familiar, honest even. Slack pinged once. A DM from someone at Weston, infra lead if I remembered right. A single line. Never mute the person holding the logs. I smiled small, quiet, the kind nobody sees. Then I closed Slack, shut the lid of my laptop, and let the system breathe on its own.